All right, family covenant for the modern age, but Abraham. Perhaps the most common story used to justify family separation is the story of Abraham. To understand the story properly, we need to chew on it for a while and apply some of the concepts we've already discussed in this book. As with every story in the Bible, we need to ask ourselves what happened in the lead up to the story. Why are these characters introduced at this point in the story? Let's take a look at what happened in the lead up to Abraham. Remember when the whole world turned evil before the flood? What was God's solution? The family of Noah. They were taken out of the evil world and given the task of resetting humanity. But soon after the flood, the whole world again turned evil. So what would we expect God to do now? He had already promised not to annihilate humanity again with a flood, and he had already expressed regret over making humanity to begin with. So we see him stuck between a rock and a hard place. To abandon humanity would be the same as wiping them out. To stay with humanity would mean choosing another man and using his family to heal the world. That's precisely what we see happening when he chose Abraham and called him out of evil toward a patch of land. God promised to bless his family and use them to bless the whole world. Notice that God didn't call Abraham to fix the world's problems. He promised him a family. Family is God's solution to the world's problems, not a distraction from the solution. Since family does not exist outside the family of God, we can't say that Abraham left his family. He left a group of Satan worshippers, right? By following God, Abraham said yes to family, not no to family. If your family is part of God's people, it's a completely different scenario than if your family is not part of God's people. In John Bunyan's novel Pilgrim's Progress, the main character realizes that his city is going to be destroyed. So he pleads with his family to escape the destruction with him. But they laugh at him and refuse to go with him. So he is forced to go the journey alone. In this case, he didn't leave his family. They left him by staying in the city of destruction. The story of Abraham can seem like just another story in the list in the Bible, right? Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, etc. But the story of Abraham is extremely significant because he's the man God chose to be the God of. That's why for the rest of the Bible, you hear the phrase God of Abraham. Yes, God was always the God of the whole world, but the whole world had repeatedly abandoned him for other gods. Those other gods were destroying the world by demanding blood sacrifices and dealing out violence on the earth. David talks about this in Psalm 58. Do you indeed decree what is right, you gods? Do you judge the children of man uprightly? No. In your hearts you devise wrongs. Your hands deal out violence on earth. When we arrive at the story of Abraham, the question is, how is God going to reclaim his world from the hands of these other gods? The answer is, he's going to win the hearts of the world by showing them how he is different from other gods. He's going to display his love, mercy, justice, and miracles through a family so that the whole world will turn to him. But before showing the whole world, he will need to show Abraham himself that he's different from other gods. He will become Abraham's friend and reveal his character to him. Since he's going to launch a massive story through Abraham that will take up most of the Bible, he needs to reveal himself in a way where neither Abraham nor his descendants would confuse him with the gods of other peoples. Let's look at a timeline of what happened. Genesis chapter 11 and 12 show us that God called Abraham after his father's death. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren. She had no children. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the daughter of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Genesis chapter 11 ends with the death of Terah. Then Genesis chapter 12 starts with these words. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." We see that God is calling Abraham out of his dead father's house. It's interesting to note that it was Terah's decision to leave the land of Ur, not Abraham's. No reason is given for this decision. It's also interesting that they were going to Canaan but stopped in Haran. Did God call Terah to the land of Canaan? It doesn't say. In any case, after Terah's death, Abraham moved from Haran with his family just as he had done from Ur. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. So, what did God mean when he said, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's house to the land I will show you"? It seems as though God was saying, don't go back to your father's people in the land of Ur. Obviously, Abraham would have been considering that option now that his father was dead, unless God had called him while he had been in Ur. But if God had called him to leave his kindred and his father's house in Ur, then why did he take his father with him? By taking his father, he would have interpreted God's words to mean leaving his physical house, not his family. The fact that the whole immediate family stayed together shows us that Abraham didn't leave his family. After Terah's death, Abraham followed God's call to Canaan, but his brother Nahor didn't go with him for some reason. Haran's son Lot, however, did go with him for some reason. The birth order of Abraham's siblings seems like it would be significant here, but the text doesn't tell us explicitly who the firstborn was. Abraham is listed first as the sons of Terah, so we could assume he was the firstborn, but this might not be conclusive evidence. Supposing he was the firstborn, why didn't his younger brother Nahor go with him? Wouldn't the younger brother follow the firstborn to the land that the whole family had been moving to? Even if Nahor was older than Abraham, wouldn't he want to continue the journey that his father had set out on? The text doesn't tell us what his reason was, but maybe he wanted to stay loyal to his idol-worshipping roots. Later in the story, we see that Nahor's descendants were idol worshippers. Rachel took her father's idols, which likely had been passed down from her great-grandpa Nahor. Regardless of his reason to stay behind, God orchestrated a coming together of the family in both Rebekah's generation and Rachel and Leah's generation. Perhaps it was God who caused Nahor to stay behind so that Jacob would have a place to escape to when he fled from Esau. So we see Abraham's family moving together till the point of Haran, then splitting up for 2 generations, and then joining together again to produce Jacob, Israel. Abraham made his servant swear that he would get a wife for his son from his brother Nahor's family. "Put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth." We can see how zealous Abraham was to reunite his family. He wasn't going to risk permanent separation by letting his son marry a foreigner. He was likely grieved that his brother had decided to stay in Haran, but he wasn't going to let that grief stop him from family reconciliation. In all of Abraham's actions, he proved that he was committed to his family. He stayed with his father until his death, and he reunited his family after Nahor separated them. If we want further evidence that Abraham didn't leave his father, Stephen says in Acts chapter 7 that Abraham left after his father died. What about Abraham and Lot splitting up? Again, we can see that Abraham put his family first by trying to keep the peace in the family. He didn't want their quarreling herdsmen to break apart their relationship, so he let his nephew choose the best land for himself. The text doesn't say God wanted them to split up. In fact, we can infer that God didn't want them to split up because he was so happy when Abraham rescued Lot later in the story. So, in the whole story of Abraham, we see strong family ties, not weak ones. We don't see God asking people to leave their immediate family. It's an interesting detail that Haran died in the presence of his father. Perhaps the very reason God chose Abraham was because he was a faithful family man. After all, God would need a faithful family man in order to launch the family that would save the whole world. Next, we get to one of the most gut-wrenching stories in the Bible, the sacrifice of Isaac. We need to handle this story with utmost care because Abraham and Isaac are the fathers of God's whole family to this very day. This story wouldn't make any sense if it was any other characters. Since Abraham's family was going to be the carrier of God's salvation for the nations, God needed to clearly establish the means by which that salvation was going to come about. He chose faith to be that means. Salvation has always been through faith alone. But Abraham broke faith when he went along with Sarah's plan to fulfill God's promise through their own means, Hagar. God didn't like this at all because he wasn't going to let his promise pass through Abraham's faithlessness. How could salvation be by faith if it came through a faithless man? If Isaac had been born through Abraham's faithlessness, he would have needed to be cut off from God's people. That's why Ishmael was cut off. Isaac was born after Abraham's faithlessness. So when God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, he was really asking him to sacrifice his faithlessness so that the line could continue through him. Abraham understood exactly what God was doing because he told Isaac, God himself will provide. Then he called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. God did provide because after he had seen Abraham's faith, he did not require the blood of his son, but provided the blood of a ram as a substitute. Not surprisingly, on that very mountain 2,000 years later, we see another son carrying the wood that he himself would be sacrificed on. Jesus was the substitute that the Lord provided. God clearly established several things through Father Abraham. 1, God requires faith. 2, God does not require child sacrifice like other gods. 3, God himself will provide the sacrifice required. 4, God gives people a chance to repent of their faithlessness. Notice that Isaac didn't die. If it had been Moloch testing Abraham, Isaac would have died. God brought Abraham to that mountain to make a clear distinction between himself and other gods. He wants his people to see that distinction and live it out. From that moment onward, the family of Abraham would need to live out this lesson until the whole world was blessed. Throughout Israel's history, God had made it clear that he didn't even like sacrifices if they weren't offered in faith. Look at what he says in Isaiah 66. These are the ones I look on with favor, those who are humble and contrite in spirit, and who tremble at my word. But whoever sacrifices a bull is like one who kills a person, and whoever offers a lamb is like one who breaks a dog's neck. Whoever makes a grain offering is like one who presents pig's blood, and whoever burns memorial incense is like one who worships an idol. They have chosen their own ways, and they delight in their abominations. God wants our faith. He himself will provide the sacrifice. That's why Jesus, the sacrifice, said, "When the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth?" Christians today are sons of Abraham if they have faith in God. We have the same mission to bless the whole world, but we can't do it by sacrificing our children.